Right, we're going to go ahead and put our hook in the vise, and this is the Gamakatsu B10S Classic Streamer Hook. This is the size 2. This is going to be the back section of the articulated fly that we are making today. So go ahead and start my thread up by the eye, work back to about where the hook just starts to bend, and cut the tag. Then we're going to take some Maxima Chameleon. Usually use clear, but I'm using the chameleon just so you can see what's going on here a little bit easier. I'm going to go ahead and tie in like a 3 or 4 inch section of this, and this is going to be a foul proofing agent. So this is how we're going to do this. We take the next material, which is rabbit strip. This is Sculpin olive. You could do it in olive if that's what you've got. And I typically just use the normal rather than the Magnum, which I know some guys really like Magnum, but here we're just going with normal rabbit strip. We're going to cut off about a 3 inch section here, and we're going to tie it on just like a Zonker. So with a Zonker, you're going to have the entire length of the hook covered with rabbit strip, so you have to plan accordingly. So we're just going to fold those fibers forward and tie it in, and do first tight, kind of loose, and then just wrap progressively harder. And that's one of the nice things about the Vivas thread, is you can put a whole lot of tension on it and it's not going to break. Then we're going to take a bodkin, and this is how we make this not foul as much around the hook shank. Pop a hole right in the center, make sure you don't stick it through your finger, and then you're just going to slide that monofilament through the rabbit strip, making a loop with it. And it's a little bit unorthodox using it in a Zonker style, just because you have to have the monofilament that's going to be on the top. It's going to come off to one side of the rabbit strip. I don't care that much. To me, it's more about the thing working than it is about it looking perfectly beautiful. But that's going to help it not get tangled as much in the back hook. And just go ahead and make sure that's all good and secure. Then we go to the next material, which is stuff that we package here in the shop. We call it flash wrap. This is pearl, and it's basically like a really long polar chenille that's a lot more supple than actual polar chenille. Then the next is these bunny brushes, which make life a lot easier. I really like them. You could do just a dubbing loop with rabbit hair, but I like to crank these out as quick as possible, and having the little tiny piece of metal there makes it way easier to tie in. And we'll tie in the flash wrap first, just making sure it's good and tight. Don't need anything coming undone. Then we're going to tie this bunny brush in by the metal insert. You'll see it. Yeah, you can see it. And get that good. And we're actually going to take the metal, push it backwards, and wrap over it again. And so what that's doing is just doubling down on making sure that this isn't going to come undone. I've never had one come undone, but this is what everybody else does, so we're gonna go with that. Throw a half hitch in just to make sure that my thread stays in place. And if you have a full rotary, you could just use that function to get it up. I'm gonna just wrap it around so you can, for those that don't have full rotary. We're probably gonna go super speed on this because it's just wrap both up at the same time. Alright, so I cut off both of them once I got up to about the eye. Leave a little bit of space there because you don't want to crowd the eye. Then I take my dowel with Velcro and just brush out that rabbit. Some of it's going to get trapped. Some of the little flash wrap is going to get trapped as you're wrapping it up. So this just helps undo some of that. And if this doesn't get it out, then it's stuck in there permanently. Just stroke all of those fibers back. I push them down with my right hand. With my left hand, I'm making sort of a landing pad with my right hand for that rabbit strip. And that's how we're going to get this fly to be two-tone. And again, there's a lot of patterns out there that are like this. This is a style I like. It's a little more supple. It doesn't have a ton of flash in it. And it just, I think it looks good in the water. So especially on pressured places where you want to throw a streamer, but you don't want something that's just crazy in your face, this is a good route. Cut off that leather portion. Then we're just going to go ahead and clean up the head. And what that means is just taking thread wraps to make everything look pretty and even. And you could go ahead and add a mallard flank to this if you want, but I'm going to finish it here. I'm going to cut off the rabbit strip to where it's maybe a 1/4 inch longer than the hook shank. And then I'll just clean up that head a little bit more, adding more thread wraps. Then we'll come in with the Solarez bone dry just to make sure that this thing stays good forever, and hit it with the UV light. And that is the finished trailer hook. So now we go to the Gamakatsu B10S size 1. It's going to be the front hook. I'm going to go ahead and just start our thread. And that way I don't lose my bobbin. That's what usually happens. I'm going to grab an articulated fish spine. This is the 20mm. And there's a lot of ways you could prep this to get it on. But what we're going to do is just as barbaric and Spartan as possible, because I'm all about that. It's just put it on the trailer hook and then tie it down. You could chop off the little loop. If you wanted this to be really streamlined, or maybe you're adding stuff to it that you're afraid that that loop will inhibit or make not nice, then cut it off. Use fancy massive pliers, chop it. But I like it there, especially on these patterns, because they're pretty straightforward, and the loop in my mind just makes sure that that thing is not going to come undone. And super glue also does a good job of that. I'm going to take some Flashabou. This is just pearl. And I halved it. And we're just going to do the classic streamer thing. This is the old Kelly Gallup classic, which is tying in some flash to cover the gap between our front hook and our back hook. On this one, I'm not going to go all the way around. I don't care about it being a perfect circle. I'm just going to do pretty much, it's covering like the top 50-60% of the hook. It will once I spread it out more. We're going to cut that at about 1/3 the distance of the back hook. So this isn't rocket science. I mean, you don't have to go crazy on proportions. Just make it to where it's not too much flash. It's just enough to give a little razzle dazzle. And then we're going to repeat everything that we did on the back hook. So this is how a lot of articulated flies are for 90% of them. It's just whatever you did on the back hook, you're going to repeat on the front hook. So we're going to do the same thing with the Zonker strip. We're just going to do a lot shorter tail. So we're only doing enough to cover maybe 1/4 of the back hook. So the tail's really tiny. You don't have to worry about that fouling because it's so short it can't. The super glue is holding on to that leather strip good. We're going to wrap it down, make sure it's good and tight. We're going to do some lead-free wire just to weight the front end of the hook. And I like to do this more towards the middle. And I always do this at this stage rather than before, because I want that shank that we attached the back hook with, I want that to be a direct connection to the front hook. I don't want there to be weight or something else that it's going to have to be sort of working around. So I always do this at this point. Just fold those down because they're notorious for cutting thread. It's not as bad with the Vivas, I will say that. And then I'm going to do some thread wraps just to cover it. Take your thumbnail, push it down. Again, we're just covering it. You don't have to cover the whole thing perfectly, making it look all glitzy, glamorous. That right there is never going to come undone. So throw another half hitch in, exact same thing as the back step, which is just wrapping those two materials up at the same time, the bunny brush and then the flash wrap in pearl. Then we're going to push this forward just like we did on the back hook and lay it down on the front hook. You can see I left a little bit of a head there for the actual head of the fly that we'll do here in just a minute. But wrap it down, just make sure it stays centered on the hook on the very top. That'll help the fly keel properly, or as you're retrieving it, it's not going to spin around like crazy. And just clean that up, make sure that it's not going to come undone. Then the next material is the legs. These are just barred crazy legs, golden yellow, pearl flake. I really like these guys. They're straightforward. We're going to just grab 2 of them and pull them apart. I'm going to go ahead and tie that in. Once we've gotten those 2 legs pulled off, you're going to simply just hold them in place on the side closest to me. Do 2 or 3 wraps, position them where you want them, and then we're going to take the other side, just hold it over with your left hand, and then wrap that down 2 or 3 times. So now that those are on there, you can do just a couple more wraps to make sure that they stay where you want them. And you should have about a 1/4 inch for the head, which in this one is going to be wool. And this is an olive colored wool. You could use Sculpin Wool. There's all sorts of different subs that you could work out of just using this wool. You could use Senyo's laser hair, Senyo's laser dub. But the way I'm making this, I like wool. It looks cool, it's easy to tie in, make it really bulky, and it's a natural material, which I like. It's just personal preference, really. But we're going to grab about that much, and we're going to spread it out and kind of fully enclose it around the fly. So that takes a little bit to learn. It's a little finicky. But once it's fully enclosed, I'm going to do 1 wrap so I can get it good. And then just make some tight wraps around it. And that's going to make this bulky head. And we'll do that 1 more time with about the same amount after I brush this stuff out. This is one of the tricks with wool. It's just brushing it out, making everything as even as you can. Hold it back with your left hand, wrap in front. And we're going to repeat the process with the same amount of wool. So I'm cutting that, and then we will hold back with your left hand, place it all the way around, and evenly distribute it as best as you can. Do 1 wrap down loose, and then just crank down on it. Then hold all that back, wrap in front of it, and we're going to go ahead and whip finish. I usually do a finger whip finish because it helps me with my left hand. I can hold everything back a little bit easier. Again, this is a personal preference thing. And then we'll brush that out with a little tiny deer hair comb, or if you've got, what is this, like a little lice comb or whatever. I don't know, it sounds grosser. It sounds better to say deer hair comb. So we'll comb all that out. And we'll need to cut the legs here in a second as well. But I'll do my initial cuts just to get everything sorted. These are just bum scissors. They're not really all that sharp because you can dull out scissors really quick on this wool. But we're just trimming the profile of whatever it is that we want. Now, the thicker or the more hair you leave, the more difficult it is for this fly to sink and get down, but the more push you have. So it's one of these things where just try and balance however much push you want. So if you want the thing to be pushing a ton of water, then leave a really large head. If you want it to sink quickly and still give that good push like wool does, and then just keep trimming the thing down. So I'll probably show you in 2 parts how I would do it. Some of them I do tend to leave a little larger, but I like these ones. Like I made this for a particular river where I throw 6 or 7 weights. So I'm going to trim down the head a lot more than what I usually usually would. And just take that comb. That's going to help you make sure that you're making accurate cuts. So you could leave it as bulky as we've got it right here. Gives you a good wide profile. You can glue an eye on if you want. We'll trim our legs. Pull them up. Just make sure they're positioned right. So you could go out and fish this thing all day, but I'm going to go ahead and keep trimming. And I'm going to give it kind of a bit of a, I would call it like a shovel head. So it's pretty flat on the upper portion and the lower portion. And that is it.